Hey all, Elio here with the Eorzean Archives. With Allo Allo in the rearview mirror and 7.0 on the not too far off horizon, I thought it might be a fun time to talk about and speculate on the variant dungeons we might see in future expansions, where I cover each and every playable race, from the Miqo'te to the Viera. But to start with, today we're going to cover the Roegadyn. First, a little setup. On the off chance you don't know about variant dungeons, they're a type of content introduced in Endwalker to help flesh out the world and its story for places old and new, as well as provide actual content for you to do for extrinsic rewards. But we here at the Eorzean Archives are devoutly unaware that anything beyond lore exists in the game, and therefore have no concept of such things. This is sarcasm, I'm a particular fan of the new shiny drip. This expansion we got 3 variant dungeons, the Sildi Subterrane, Mount Rokon, and Allo Allo. Each is an NPC from our prior adventures who leads us and up to 3 other players through the dungeons, which each have 3 paths. Each path demonstrating a different aspect of the dungeon's theme. For example, Sildi's left path follows Nanamo and Uldah's recent history, its middle path shows Sildine history, and its right path is tied to the Amalja and the Traitor's Spurn. On Allo Allo, the paths have to do with the first people to arrive on the island, the second people to arrive, and the returning Nimians respectively. Each path also includes mechanics that change things pretty drastically, for 12 possible end states each with their own bit of lore. Interestingly enough, that marks 1 dungeon for each of the 3 great continents, Sildi and Thanalin for Aldenard, Rokon on Shishu for Othard, and Allo Allo in the South Sea Isles, which are more or less part of Ilsabard since Thavnair and the Bounty region tends to be considered a part of the Near East. Now, whether or not variant dungeons are your favorite piece of content, or if their rewards have been satisfactory is subjective. But this isn't a discussion on the actual playing of them, but more on the broadening of the world, history, and lore, as well as what we might see in the future. And in those respects, variant dungeons have been a pretty unmitigated success, as far as I'm concerned. These dungeons help fill out the edges of the maps that linger in-game, but that we haven't had a meaningful reason to go back to in any major content form. It used to be during A Realm Reborn, Heavensward, and Stormblood that we would get non-MSQ related dungeons like the Lost City of Amdapor, St. Mochians? I'm gonna go with Mosians. St. Mosian's Arboretum, the Swallow's Compass, and the many hard mode dungeons. And these would introduce us to whole new locations or advance the stories of prior places we had been to, and altogether fill out the map. But those side dungeons decreased over time, up until they stopped altogether in Shadowbringers, since which we only get the 6 MSQ, 2 post MSQ, and 5 patch dungeons, all of which need to be tightly connected to the story. Anything outside of the MSQ gets short shrift. In Endwalker, however, we got variant dungeons as a replacement, and that only added flavor, but hardcore focused on exploring the bounds of Atheris. But let's stop talking about the past and start talking about the future. What variant dungeons might we see in Dawntrail and beyond? There are actually an incredible number of candidates, with even more likely to happen when we explore locations like Tural and Mericidia, and we can expect there to be probably at least 3 variant dungeons per expansion based on Endwalker's cadence of release, and each with their own 3 paths related to different aspects of their story. There's also a lot to be said about what should and should not be a variant dungeon, but we can get into that as we go through the series. Without further ado, we can begin on the important stuff. Racial geography! Listed here are the 16 clans you can play as in Final Fantasy XIV, of which we can cross 2 off already, as we have had a variant dungeon for the Dunesfolk in Sildi Subterrane, as well as the Amalja to a degree, and for the Plainsfolk in Allo Allo. Come to think of it, there is a lot of Popoto civilization-based content, like the Weeping City of Mach, Belladia, Ul'dah, Sildi, the Wanderer's Palace, and hey, they even get their own song! Personally, I think Yoshi P just has a bias. But for the remaining 14, let's start with the Scallywag and Sea Dogs, the Thots with the thickest thighs and Himbos with the huge hulls. The Roegadyn. The Roegadyn have 2 clans, though technically up to 4 if you count the Ilsabardian and Othardian variety like Gosetsu, but if you want to know more about that, go check out our racial video. Since there are outliers for just about every race from the Hingan Hyur to the Thavnarian Al-Ra, we're gonna just focus on what's playable. In the case of the Roegadyn, that limits us to the Hellsguard and Seawolves, both of which have excellent candidates for variant dungeons. In each case, we have their homelands. For the Seawolves, that means Airslaint, and for the Hellsguard, the Far Reach. Let's do the Seawolves first. So, what is Airslaint? The Seawolves' home of Airslaint is the northernmost archipelago in the Northern Empty, to the northwest of Sharlayan. It means first land in the Seawolf tongue, which, if you want to learn more of their language and make heads or tails of the mouth-sundering Seawolf names, there's an excellent dictionary that can be found on the official Final Fantasy XIV forums. If you spend any time in Limsa, you'll know the Seawolves pretty well. It's thanks to a failed coup against a tyrannical leader that around 700 years ago, some enterprising, read desperate, Seawolf Roegadyns hopped aboard a ship called the Gladion and found their way down to Vilbrand, and ended up founding Limsa Lominsa. We don't know that much about Eorzean, beyond the fact that it's cold and its people are very Viking-esque. Its real-world counterpart would probably be Greenland, Iceland, or Scandinavia. So, cold, but very capable of green beauty and life. What few dregs of lore there are come from Encyclopedia Eorzea Volume 1 and A Realm Reborn. And it's important to remember, plenty of things we've learned in each variant dungeon so far have brought wholly new understandings of the locale's history. But from what we do know, Eorzean could make a very fun, albeit dangerous, Viking-themed variant dungeon. Forgive me while I get overly poetic in painting a picture of what we could expect aesthetically. Imagine cold iceberg-strewn seas, the water churning, and the aurora overhead. In the midst of that, an island of rocky green shores and glacial lands, howling fjords cutting into its circumference, as towering fumaroles billow from the earth. In the green valleys are villages and ships of proud Viking sea wolves, who with shanties on their tongues and salt on their lips, have called this land home for thousands of years, with traditions and structures just as old, and who knows what secrets they may be hiding. Sounds kind of enticing, yeah? What about the actual variant dungeon and its paths? Well, our adventure could see us going through the ruins of a village where important historical events happened, or maybe an ancient structure housing Seawolf history. Think of dungeons like Lapis Manalis or Sastasha. One path could be dealing with the Seawolves, who remained in power on the archipelago, what happened during that fateful coup, and in the few hundred years after. With their proximity to Ilsabard, did they ever travel further afield? Might some of them have ended up in the Blind Frost and eventually Othard? And how did their culture differ to the pirates of Limsa? Another path could be the group that actually left on the Gladian. Why did they see their ruler as such a despot? And why the heck does their ship not actually have a Rogadin name? What kind of weirdos and outcasts end up becoming the Laminsons we know? And why as an American do I feel a kinship with them so much? The final path could be about ancient Rogadin history. What were they doing for the first few astral eras? Because the absolute earliest they enter the record is potentially as one of the faithful of Sophia, which raises all sorts of questions as to who got where and when. Somewhere in there, we could also get nods to the first peoples to leave Eorzean, long before the Proto-Laminsons, the people who would become the Hellsguard. Unless one of the other South Sea Isles is their true place of origin, Allo Allo has itself made it clear that the term ancestral home, used often in Encyclopedia Eorzea, might be more accurately seen as earliest known origin, rather than the place the race actually started on post-sundering. But the ambiguity of the term is just one of the many wonderful things we love about sifting through the lore in this game. Right? Right? What about enemies? A variant dungeon has to have fauna that provides some zest. I'm going to skip out on the general wildlife, since I kid you not, I could take the better part of an hour just talking about the various forms of Bloodborne that could occupy each variant dungeon. But I will speculate on the bosses. Oh, and we need a name, don't we? For an Eorzean variant dungeon, let's call it the Eorzean Archipelago. Back to enemies. For the mid-boss, we could face one of the current living occupants of Eorzean, a mighty ship captain, descendant of the tyrannical leader from 100 years ago. Our choices in each section affecting whether he faces us alone or with his crew. For the coup path, maybe we could face off against a vengeful Ashkin, like a Draugr of the cruel leader who the Proto-Laminsons failed to overthrow. The desiccated corpse of a hulking Rogadin with glowing eyes certainly could be memorable. For the ancient history of the Rogadin, maybe we could face off against a Jotun or Gigas, who shares a remarkable similarity to the Rose of today. Or something venerated like a beast of sea wolf folklore. And for the final path, for those who left to come to Eorzea, a boat. The boss should be a boat. I don't know how that would work, and I'm not going to justify it. But we have fought tanks, trains, and automobiles. So if they can do that, they can do a bitch and boss boat battle. You know you wanted to. Moving along. Every variant dungeon has a guide, and so far every guide has been a character tied to the MSQ in some way. Nanamo, Hancock, Matsuya. Presumably so that the developers don't have to account for if your character has or has not met them yet, since things like this have caused no end of headaches for the writers, from the Crystal Tower, to Eden, and even the recent role quests. For Eorzean, the obvious choice is someone from Limsa Lominsa, though Sharlayan could also provide a meaningful row or two. To me, the most obvious choices are Merlwyb, what with their Rogadin heritage, famous navigator, and since we've had one leader already with Nanamo. Another option is Ensar Slaverson, for similar reasons, and what with this erstwhile Mistbeard having a bit more free time on his hand than the Admiral herself. Or, and this one is a little bit of a reach, Wiskat Riswardson, one of the members of the Company of Heroes. Of the three, he has the least responsibility tying him to a place, and having spent time with him in ARR and the Endwalker role quest, the man could use a bit of a story-based glow-up. Okay, that about covers Eorzean, but what about the Hellsguard? Northern Dravania, nestled on the coast of the Bloodbrine Sea, is the Far Reach, ancient home to the Hellsguard Rogadin. Highly volcanic, the chain of volcanoes in this area are where the Hellsguard get their name, and these mountains are said to lead to the very underworld itself. Imagine a valley on a coast locked in by a swift freezing ice flow of the blood-brine sea. Before it and behind it, a chain of volcanic mountains. Two vast peaks standing tall above it all act like dual pillars, carving a gateway to the seventh hell itself. Despite its desolation, the area is aether-rich, its sulphurous springs teeming with extreme life. The people who live here are as tough and sturdy as the rocks themselves, berserkers wearing leathers and bone, and fire-walking mages who always stand on the precipice of survival and destruction. And what to call this one? Well, we're going to be dealing with mountains and caves, so let's go with the Far Reach Caverns. Now, let's talk about places and paths. Adventuring through the ruins of buildings that exist to venerate the Hellsguard peaks, or helping out with an endemic problem like Scale King Gone Wild could make a lot of sense, and would work well for the setting. Problem is, we just don't have that much knowledge about the level of advancement the Hellsguard have. But seeing as the few Hellsguard we know who hail from the Far Reach, like Broken Mountain, are fairly educated, assuming that the Far Reach is mostly underdeveloped would probably be erroneous. I can imagine, however, that any of the paths would start on the outskirts of the Hellsguard Mountain, as we fight our way up, around, or into them. Since the Far Reach is where the art of the warrior comes from, and we know shockingly little about the warrior's history as a practice, besides the bits we get from Curious Gorge and the ancient texts that date back over 500 years, diving into its history fits perfectly as one of the three paths, delving into the art, how it formed during the Sixth Astral Era, and the whos and whys of it all. The other two paths are a little more tricky. One could detail the Hellsguard history and coming from Eorzean, what it was like to struggle for the better part of the past millennia or two in such an inhospitable home. But better yet, since the Hellsguard are known both for their mages and their warriors, maybe this path could complement the warrior path with details on how they developed their particular brand of arcane arts. For the final path, since the Hellsguard Mountains are known as the gateway to the underworld, and we know that the closer you go to the core of Aetheris, the closer you get to the Ethereal Sea, since it's at the heart of the star, it would be fun if one of the routes was about reaching a chamber like the ones we see in the Antitower or the Aetioscope. On enemies, for the mid-boss of the three routes, I think fighting some kind of local fauna would work. We know that the bones and leathers of the great beasts are used for various things in Hellsguard culture, but what if we could witness what kind of super scale or beastkin that they might be used to dealing with? Giant flaming yetis with fur reeking of sulfur, or titanic tyrannosaur warped by the magma fields, or even an engorged anila. For the warrior path, the boss seems kinda obvious, with it being a warrior who has lost themselves to the beast completely, like we see in the warrior questline. Only this berserker has been in this state for years, hells, maybe even decades, to the point that they are so angry that they just won't or can't die. And for added measure, when we fight them, they use Felcleave. On us. See how you like it. On the mage's path, we could face off against a pyromancer who literally walks upon flames. One half of the Hellsguard culture is devoted to magics, but we don't actually know that much about their particular brand of magic, other than that they practice firewalking to unlock their mystical talents. And whether that's simply walking on a bed of hot coals, or something far more hyperbolic, I'd love to see the idea taken to an extreme. For the final Ethereal Sea path, it would be interesting if the proximity to the sea itself, say, allowed a soul to escape, or to inhabit some kind of vessel in the arena to make a type of Ashkin. Not a soul of anyone we know, but maybe a Hellsguard who refused their fate, or some other historical figure. Alternatively, the proximity to the sea and its ambient aether mixed with the volcanic environment could simply create some kind of greater elemental that we'd have to smack down. Both ideas feel a little generic, and honestly what I'd expect is something more fresh, based on newer lore that they'd created for the dungeon, the same way we got things like Lala, Silky, or my Paralysis Demon. When it comes to guides, there's a bit of an issue. There is a shocking dearth of Hellsguard Rogadin in our adventures during the MSQ. I'm not sure one even ever gives us a quest. However, there is one candidate we get to know quite well, and even popped up recently, Hoary Boulder. Scion of the Seventh Dawn, and mostly missing save for his odd cameo now and then, and his presence in the Rising Stones, Hoary is probably the most important Hellsguard we deal with in the MSQ. He specifically hails from the Far Reach, and it would be a great entry point into that world. It would also give us a chance to catch up with his brother, Ochre Boulder. And the horniest rowophile there is on the star, the boulder-munching, threesome-craving, archer in need of a lancing, Aenor Cockburn! And her sister Clemens. Row lovers aside, that wraps up this first set of clans. To throw it out there, I do think there could be some fun to be had in variant dungeons that touch on the Othardian Rogadin, be it in the Blind Frost, the Arras, Nagsha, or any other locations we have yet to see in Othard. And likewise for the Elsabardian Rogadin, who are said to occupy the mountains that sit roughly between Garlemald and the Bounty. But since there's so little to say about them with authority, I'll move on. That marks 4 of our 16 clans down, and I think we can end things here for today. Okay, so real talk for a moment. I'm gonna level with you. I'm just one Elzen working on all of this, from the writing, filming, voicing, and editing. with the aid of my proofreader and occasional script ID and rough draft provider, Ray. Thank you for all you do, please don't kill me. And I actually wrote every race as one video at once, thinking it would be a very quick vid. And it ended up being over 6,000 words for just the first part. That was only half the races. The final document's over 10,000 words. So that's why this is being broken up into a series, with each clan getting their own video. Hopefully you'll find this more exciting than it is annoying, and the algorithm won't punish me. And if not, all I can say is, sorry. Beyond the playable clans though, I have a few more ideas which I'll be releasing alongside this series. For now though, what did you think? Did you like my ideas? Or have some of your own? Where would you like to see get some variant love next? Feel free to share your thoughts down below. Or, if you'd like to chat about them, come join our Discord, or even our free company, the Eorzean Archives over on Crystal Curl. I will make sure to get back to all the variant speculations soon, but with Encyclopedia Eorzea Volume 3 and 6.55 on the horizon, it's a busy time for lore. In the meantime, stay safe, Archons, and thanks for watching. Hey all, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, praise the 12 by giving it a like and comment, or by subscribing. It goes a long way to helping the channel. Don't forget, new videos every week, and if you want to engage with us further, why not check out our Discord and Patreon in the link below and become a part of our community. With that said, see you around, fellow Archons.